Okay, good morning and welcome to Daf Yomi, just Daf It. Yevamos Daf 60, Daf Samach. We are almost exactly halfway through Yevamos. Today we have a great share. We're going to be talking about more about psula, what makes someone a psula. It has ramifications not only for marrying a Kohen Gadol, but for also, it's mentioned in the pasuk of being matame for your sister. Kohen, a regular Kohen, the only one matame himself for Zion Krovim, he's only had to go into the cemetery. Even nowadays, this applies only for 7 close relatives. Your sister, your brother, you could always be matame for your sister, only if she's not married and only if she's a psula. If she's married or she's not a psula, she's not a virgin, so then you can't be matame for her. You can't go into the Beis HaKvaros, you can't go into the cemetery. That is another practical ramification of psula. We're going to talk about how that relates to our understanding of psula by the Isra of a Kohen Gadol marrying a woman who's not a psula. So that is one thing, and that's going to be the topic of Iyun Ben Sion. We're going to talk more about what exactly, define more clearly. We said yesterday what a psula was. There's 2 things: a mitzvah to marry a psula for a Kohen Gadol, and there was also an Isra essay of not marrying a psula. The difference between the 2 we discussed yesterday. Well, now we're going to have to refine that a little bit based on Gemara and a Tosfos, on Daf 60, on Daf Samach. Let's start from the bottom of Nun Ten Amud Beis, about 6 lines from the bottom. It says, Tana Rabbanan, Anusas Atzmo, Mufutas Atzmo, Lo Yisa. Right, a Kohen Gadol mentioned he can't marry someone who's a Ba'ula. She's been previously had sex with somebody. So Anusas Atzmo, Mufutas Atzmo, Lo Yisa. If he was the one that raped her, that's why she's not a virgin. Mufutas Atzmo, or he seduced her, Lo Yisa, he can't marry her. He's not allowed to marry her. She's not a psula. V'im nasa, but if he did marry her, nasoi, he seemingly can remain married to her. He's married to her. We'll see if he can remain married to her in a second. This is chaver. Let's say someone else rapes this woman. They weren't married to her. They raped her or seduces her. There was a bia. Lo yisa, he can't marry v'im nasa. Let's say he went ahead and violated the Isser in the Torah. Can he remain married? Lezer ben Yaakov Omer Havlad Chalal. If they remain married, they have children. The Vlad would have the din of a halal, right? If an almana marries a Kohen Gadol, a grusha marries a Kohen, so the child that they create is not a mamzer, but it's called a halal. He's a blemished Kohen. He can't eat truma. If it's a girl, she can't marry a Kohen. The Chum Onim Havlad Kasha. The Chum say technically they're not supposed to remain married, but if they have a child, the child would be kosher. So now the Gemara is going to analyze this brayso. Nasa Amar Rav Huna. If he marries the woman he rapes, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, they can remain married. Umotzi beget. It doesn't mean he can remain married to her. It just means that he has to divorce her also. So the Gemara asks, it says he can remain married. So which is it? If he remain married, he has to divorce her. Amar Rav Bar Yaakov. Yaakov says Lomar, top of Samach Amin Aleph, Lomar she'im neshalim knas mavuta. It doesn't mean that he can stay married. It just means im nasa naso, that if he married her, it means that it has the status of a marriage. If you're ma'anis a woman, right? So you have to pay a knas. You have to marry her, and you have to pay a knas. Even if you marry, you have to pay a knas to her father. 50 chamishim sela, 50 sela, it says in the Torah, which is the same as the amount of a ksuva. Matayim dinar, 200 dinar. By mafuta, if you seduce her, meaning she does it willingly, she really doesn't want to be together with you, but you convince her to be together with you, you don't rape her, so then you have a choice. Either you can marry her and not pay the knas, or you don't marry her and you pay the knas. So that's what it means over here. It's only talking, nothing else. You're only going on the case of mafuta. If he seduces her, then if he wants to pay the money, it's effective, and he's considered married to her, and he is not responsible for the knas. But the Gemara said he has to be multi beget. He can't say you're married to her. Azar Rav Gvia mi Beik Sil. Amar l'Shmais made Rav Ashi. Rav Gvia from Ksil Beik Sil said this statement in front of Rav Ashi. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan Amrit Ravaya. Rabbi Yochanan Amrit Ravaya. Bulgaris Mukha says Lo Yisa Im Nasa Nasa. They have a statement that, like we said before yesterday, there's an Isser, and you can't marry a Kohen Gadol can't marry Bulgaris, right? If she turned 12 and a half years old, she has Simone Bagros. She's an older woman. Muka Sates, or even if she's younger, but she had wood that went in vagina and went in there and pierced the hymen, Lo Yisa, he can't marry her. V'imnasa nasoi. But if he did marry her, B'di'evet, it's considered a good marriage. So Alma Sophlios Bulgaris Tak. What's the reason? The reason Rav and Rabbi Yochanan said he can remain married is because if he would have married her when she's a complete psula, she's going to be a Bulgaris. He married her as a Nara, she's going to grow up. They're going to remain married to Bulgaris. So V'lias Mukazes Tachtav also, if he marries her when he does a Be'ilah, he removes the hymen over there. So and even though previously he shouldn't have remained married to her, but she's going to end up being a couple of Mukazes Tachtav. Here also, we should say this also, when he's ma'anis to one or mafat to her. So therefore, just like she's the reason she's not a psula is because someone was ma'anis or had beer with her previously, he's going to have beer when he marries her. So the same reason should apply. If Rabbi Yochanan said that by a Bulgaris Mukasates, but the Eved can remain married, here also he should be able to remain married. How could we say that you have to be motzi begets? The Gemara says kasha. It really is a good question. We don't have a great answer for this, or remain it as a kasha. Whereas Anus Chaver and Fus Chaver Yisav Nasa Ben Yaakov Omer Avlad Chalal the Chum Omer Avlad Kosher. The second case of the brisa is where someone else's man is not the Kohen Gadol. So this talks about what to do if they remain married. They have a child. Ben Yaakov says the child is a halal. Amar Rav Huna Marav Halacha Ben Yaakov Lachval Ben Yaakov, the child of that union. Obviously, they can't stay married. Right, like I said, he's motzi beget even if he was the one who rapes her. Certainly, if someone else rapes her, he has to be motzi her. But the question of Vlad Chal, Rezer ben Yaakov says the Vlad is a Chal in that case. The Vlad, the child is a Chalal. My time with the Rezer ben Yaakov. What's the reasoning? What's his svara? Savarlak Rezer, he holds like Rezer. Rezer says that Panei Abal Pnuya, a man who's not married, has relations with a woman who's not married. That creates. That's a zona. It's a zona. You make her a zona, and the child presumably will be a halal. So therefore, also over here, right, the woman she's not less than Panei Bal Pnuya, even if the Pnuya wasn't, she was a psula, and she wasn't nensa, she wasn't raped by anybody else. So certainly when someone raped by somebody else, he'd agree with Rabbi Elazar that the Vlad is a halal and the woman becomes a zona. So the Gemara says, "Mi sarla kavase is Rabbi Yaakov really hold to Rabbi Elazar? V'hakaimala and Mishnah Rabbi Yaakov kavanach." We always paskin like Rabbi Yaakov when he says something. His Mishnayos, he doesn't comment often in the Mishnayos. When he does, it's naki, it's clean. We always paskin like them. He had a good svara. Ilbaha Amar Rav, but we know definitively that in terms of Elazar's statement, Panei Bal Pnuya. Asa zona, we don't paskin like that. We don't paskin as considered znus. That doesn't make her a zona. So it can't be. We don't paskin like Rabbi Elazar and Yaakov. We don't paskin like Rabbi Elazar. So we don't paskin like Rabbi Elazar. It can't be Elazar and Yaakov. We do paskin like was holding the logic, was based on the logic of Elazar and Rabbi Elazar. So where it says kasha, it is indeed a difficulty. Again, a difficulty. We're leaving it as a difficulty. Ravashi Amar B'yesh Chalal. Ravashi says a different way. B'yesh Chal, a different svara for Elazar and Yaakov. B'yesh Chal mechayvi esek ameflagi. The machlokas in Elazar and Yaakov and the Rabbanan is whether you can create a chalal when a Kohen or Kohen Gadol violates an Isser essay, meaning it's not Asr Midin Lav, it is Asr Midin essay. And this pasuk is clearly an Isser essay. It says, Almana grusha v'chalal zona is eila lo yikach kim b'sulam amav yikach isha. Right? And almana grusha v'chalal, that has the din of a lav. You can't lo yikach. Kim b'sula, he has to marry a psula. It says he has to marry a psula. So we know the inverse is that he can't marry someone who's not a psula. So that has the din of a chayv essay. So does that create a chalal or not? Elazar ben Yaakov sarva yesh chalal mechayv essay. Well, sarva ein chalal mechayv essay. My time with Elazar ben Yaakov. Dichsev almana grusha v'chalal v'zona seila lo yikach. Kim b'sula, like the pasuk I just said. Dichsev lo yichal zara ba'amav. The next pasuk says lo yichal zara ba'amav, that if you do any of these things, you're going to create a chalal. So the Gemara, so Elazar ben Yaakov akulu, that's going on everything in the previous pasuk, even the chayv essay. Rabbanan eila hifsik ha'inyan. Rabbanan say no. It says almana grusha v'chalal v'zona. It's eila. It says eila lo yikach. And that divides the pasuk between that and the second half of the pasuk Kim Sulam Amav Hikach. So therefore, when the next pasuk says Lo Yichal Zara Ba'amav, again this week's parsha, Parshas Emor, so it's only referring to the first half of the pasuk. Eila divides the pasuk into two. For Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov Amar Eila, what does the word Eila do? It's a hamiyat lamute nida. It comes to tell you that a nida, that if a Kohen Gadol or a Kohen has bia with a nida and they create a child, that doesn't make a chalal. Kaman azla ha desanim eila ata osa chali ata osa chal minida. Kaman Yaakov. Who's the one, the time that says the only exception we don't make a chal is a nida, but everywhere else, even by a buula, it would make a chalal. That's Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov nichtav eila lebasof. If Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov holds that eila is just the miyah to exclude a nida, but really everything in the pasuk is included lo yichal zara ba'amav, creates a chalal. Why didn't you say eila at the end? Why did eila divide the pasuk into two? So the Gemara says this is indeed kasha. Again, it remains a difficulty. Tana Rabbanan Achoso. Now we're going to get into a different ramification of basula. Tana Rabbanan Achoso Arusa. Right? Let's say you have a sister and she's engaged, right? And then she dies. Rabbi Yehuda Omrim Mitamila. You're a Kohen, right? She's your sister. So Rabbi Yehuda say you can be Mitame for her because we have a pasuk. Let's just look at the pasuk for a second. The pasuk. Again, this week's parsha, right? All other relatives, your mother, your father, your son, your daughter, your wife, your brother, all of those, right, apply in all instances. Your sister doesn't apply in all instances. The Torah qualifies that. It says your sister only applies if she's a psula. And she wasn't married. So what about if she's engaged but not married? So this is a machlokas tanoim. So they say, she's not married. She's only arusa. You can tamid her. Rabbi Yosef Rishon Omrim ein metamela. Rabbi Yosef Rishon. We'll see the reasoning in a second. They say you can't be metamer her. Anusa mafuta. If your sister was raped, right? She wasn't engaged. She was raped and mafuta or seduced. Devrei call ein metamela. Everyone agrees that since she had bia, and arusa usually doesn't have bia, but here she had bia with somebody else. Everyone agrees ein metamela. Right? We're going to see because it says psula. She's not a psula anymore because she was raped. Umuka says emetamala. Emetamala. Umuka says emetamala. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. Umuka says one had a piece of wood lodged in that place in the vagina, so then it pierced the hymen. So emetamala. You're not going to be metamala because we'll see in a second the reason. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Omer Ruyal Kan Gadol Metamala. Shein Ruyal Kan Gadol emetamala. He says even though she wasn't Haisal Ish, she was never together with another man. Still, she's not royal. We saw yesterday. The Mishnah says conclusively, according to everybody, and Mukha Seitz is not fit for a Kohen Gadol because the hymen is completely removed. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon learns that she's not fit to be a Kohen Gadol. So therefore, you can't be metame for her. You can't go into a cemetery to bury her if you're a Kohen. Bogeres metamela divrei kol adam. Everyone agrees also by Bogeres that you could be metame for her. Even though we had machlokas yesterday whether a Kohen Gadol could marry a Bogeres. Where a mayor says that, I believe a mayor says that he could marry a Bogeres. Sorry, Rameir says you can't marry a Bogeres, and Rabbi Lezer and Shimon say you could marry a Bogeres. Everyone agrees by your sister, if she's a Bogeres, she's 12 and a half or older, you're allowed to be metame for her. She's still considered to be a psula. So we're going to analyze this price in a second. So then where it says, my time with the Rameir, what's the Rameir, Rabbi Huda? The Darshi Hachi, Lachos, how do you darsh in the Pasuk? Lachos Psula, your sister is a Psula, Pral Anusa Mafuta. That comes to exclude a woman, your sister, who was raped or seduced. She had bia with somebody else. She's not a Psula, she's not a virgin. You might think also Mukha Seitz should be excluded. I can't be metame for her. That something penetrated her through a man penetrated. It's a piece of wood or something else pierced there, not the man, so therefore she's not considered to be someone who's she's still considered a psula regarding bimatame for akrova. It's akrova that he's close to her. The rabos harusa, he's still close to her, even though she's engaged. She wasn't married yet, so he can matame for her according to her mayor. Elov, the rabos of Bulgaris, Elov is close to him. The rabos of Bulgaris, even if she's a Bulgaris, even if she's older, she's 12 and a half plus. She has signs of a woman. She has breasts and she has she has a voice of a woman. She's a Bulgaris. Halam alikra. So the Gemara says, so she would be included. You could be mitame for her. So where's halam alikra? Why do you need a pasuk to include a Bulgaris? Hamar Rebbe Shemeir psula feel makes psula mashma. The mayor said yesterday, whenever it says psula in the Torah, it means even if she's partially a psula. So a Bulgaris is partially a psula. We'll explain this morning of Ben Sion what does it mean partially a psula. I have an interesting Tosafos showing him over here. Feel mixes psula mashma. So we don't need a pasuk for that. Why do you need an elav to include that? You might think you learn psula from over there. What we're talking about, this is talking about a nara amurasa, right? Someone who rapes a nara amurasa is called a psula. Only if she's a psula, you have to pay a knas. You have to pay a knas to the father. Malahala nara, just by nara amurasa, she has to be a nara. She has to be between 12 and 12 and a half. If she's a Bulgaris, you wouldn't pay the knas. Afkan naminara. You might think also here, by Tuma b'matame, brother b'matame for his sister, she has to be a narak mashmalan. Even if she's a Bulgaris, you can matame for her. Rosary Shimon, what's my time? What's the dissenting view? Darshi hachi alachosa absula pralanusim mafuta mukasates. It says alachosa absula, that comes to exclude whether she was raped or seduced or even a mukasates, because there was penetration. Even if it wasn't a man, there was penetration of a piece of wood. So therefore, it's not called a psula. She doesn't have the psulim. Hasher haiz lo haisa prala arusa. Sher lo haisa comes to exclude arusa. This is the source of the machlokas, the main machlokas. Even if she's engaged, she can't be mitame. Krova comes to include something that he could be mitame. The was arusa she's garsha. Even if she was engaged, as long as she's divorced now, so she's not attached to the other man. So therefore, you're allowed to be mitame for elav rabos of Bulgaris. Elav, like we said, everyone comes to include a Bulgaris, that he could be mitame for krova l'rabos arusa she's garsha. The Gemara analyzes this opinion of Yossi and Shimon. They said akrova l'rabos arusa she's garsha. Akrova comes to tell me even if she's in arusa, as long as she's divorced now, presently, you could be mitame for her. So the more on top of Samach Hamavei says, "V'hamar Rabbi Shimon ruya l'kohen gadol mitamila, she'en ruya l'kohen gadol mitamila." Right, Rabbi Shimon is one of the opinions. Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon says, we told before that he said you have to be royal l'kohen gadol. So in Amanha mina erisin or in a grusha mina erisin, we said yesterday, she's already asura l'kohen gadol. So how could she be mitami for her? So I said, "Shani Hasan the Rabbi Rachmana krova." There's an extra pasuk. You're right. Really, in Sfaro would have said that he can't be mitame for the fact that it says Torah goes out of its way to say krova comes to include her, that if arusha is garsha, you could be mitame for her. Ihaki mukaseitz nami. So let's say mukaseitz nami, mukaseitz, right? Why don't we include krova to include a woman as mukaseitz, even though she's not really a kohen gadol, but she should be, the kohen should be able to mitame for his sister. So then where it says Rabbi krova achas v'lo shtayim. It says krova, it's singular. So it comes to include one case, but not two cases. Why do you include this case and not mukaseitz? Mukaseitz, there was penetration, something happened to her. A Bulgaria, Arusa Shedin's Garsha, she became engaged, and then she got divorced. Nothing really happened to her. Maybe she got kesef, or she got a get, but those are not things which happened to her body, so therefore, or more machmir when something happened to her body. Rabbi Yossi, the Shav Kele Bar Zuge, Rabbi Yossi argues in Rabbi Shimon. Right? It's only Rabbi Shimon who says Ruya l'kohen gadol. So he argues on him in what? In terms of mukazes. We call him mukazes krei meis really. He argues on him, not in the case of Arusa, but he argues on the case of mukazes, and he would agree that mukazes, he could be mitame for her. Krei meis really. Minole, where does he know that from? Malai sali ish. It says Malai sali ish. He wasn't to a man. It's like we said before, of yasali de ish, it has to be, the penetration was not only through a man, but penetration done through a piece of wood. That wouldn't make her no roy to mitame. You could be mitame for her. The Gemara said fikde, you already used it. You already used it for something else, right? According to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, we said lo haisa share lo haisa prat la rusa akra. That comes to exclude. It's not coming to include a mukase. It's coming to exclude an arusa. And Rabbi Yossi agrees. He argues by an arusa. So the Gemara says fikde. So the Gemara answers. Chad melo haisa v'chad melo ish, right? The word lo haisa comes to include a mukaseh, lo haisa, right? Chad melo haisa v'chad melo ish. Elav, right? So one pasuk lo haisa depends that lo haisa wasn't done through And a man, Lahaisa Leish, and Muka says also wasn't done through a man, so Shimuteris, then it's Leish, that even if she's Leish, if she was Arusa to him, then she would be Asura to him. The brother would not allowed to be Matame to her. So now the Gemara continues darshaning the price. Elav the Rabbos of Ageres. So Elav, like Rav Meir says, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon also say it comes to include Ageres, that it could be Matame for Amar Rabbi Shimon Psula Shlema Mashma. How could he say that? We said yesterday that the plain meaning of the word basula in the Torah would have just had the word basula. It means he has to be a complete basula. Bogeres. She's not a complete basula. The way we were explaining yesterday, Bogeres lost part of her hymen. It becomes weakened, becomes deficient. It's not as full of skin. So therefore, it's not considered a basula shlema. The Gemara says, "Time didei nami hasam mehacha." The darish hachim, the elav, the rabbos of Bogeres, mechal basula shlema. No, he got his reasoning. What happened first? First, he had this pasuk of elav. Elav comes to include a Bogeres. So the fact that the Torah went out of its way to say elav to include a Bogeres, to say that normally when it says basula, you need a basula shlema. Only over here, when it comes to matame for your sister, even if she's not a complete basula, you could be matame her. But normally you need to be a complete basula. Tanya Reb Shimon ben Yochai Omer. We're going to shift gears now. We're going to talk about the Isser of a Kohen to marry a Giores. He's not allowed to marry. This is common halacha. A Kohen is not allowed to marry a woman who converted. Now, what about if she converted when she was less than 3 years and 1 day old? Where it says, "Tanya Rishon ben Yochai Omer Yeras Pekusav V'Ashol Hashanah Yom Echad Sheira Lakuna." This is an interesting halacha. There is an opinion that says if she converted when she was a baby, before she was 3 years and 1 day, she's kosher to the kuna. Shenemar V'Chol Ataf. Where do we know that? V'Chol Ataf Menashim Ashal Yadu Mishkav Zachar Yachyu Lachem. It says in the pasuk by Midyan, when Klal Yisrael killed out Midyan and Sefer Bamidbar, and the Sefer Bamidbar, Moshe instructed Pinchas and Elazar, all the young children who are women that weren't together with men, they are kosher. They can marry into Klal Yisrael. Right? Pinchas Iman. Pinchas was one of the people. He was a Kohen. So Pinchas was a Kohen. He was allowed to marry someone even though she was a non-Jewish woman. Obviously, she converted. Rabbanan, what do they say? They say even if she's converted less than 3 years and 1 day, la'avadim l'shvacha. So all they said, they could keep them alive, not that they can marry them, but they actually could be avodim and shvachas, it could be servants. So if we allow katanos to be married, according to Reb Shimon, even if they converted, why is there a distinction of 3 years and 1 day? As long as they're lower than bat mitzvah, she should be able to marry. They converted before the bat mitzvah. The Gemara says, "Kid the Rav Huna Rami Ksiv." No, like Rav Huna's way of explaining the pasuk, Rami Ksiv. There's two psukim which seems to contradict each other. Kol isha yadas ish l'mishkav zachar harogo. Any woman that was together with a man, you should kill. Ha'ena yadas. So we can apply from that pasuk that if she wasn't together with a man, kayamu, you can keep them alive. Michlal dehataf ben yadu ben yilo yadu kaimu. As long as they're children, presumably they're under 12 years and 1 day. They're katanos. You can, even if they were together with a man, you can keep them alive and presumably marry them. And then it has a second pasuk that even the children of the woman, girls who are children, they have to not been together with men. If they were together with men, even if they were children, you have to kill them. If they were together with men, you have to kill them. Heavy Omer. How do you resolve this contradiction? The Torah must be making some distinction within children. What's that distinction? The distinction is, if we're going to make a distinction, we're talking about by girls, it's talking about 3 years and 1 day is a significant age, because at that age they become fit to have relations with a man. It's normal to have relations with a man. So therefore, that's the distinction the Torah is saying. If they're under 3 years and 1 day, then it's not dependent on whether they're together with a man or not. It's just together when they converted. If they're roy to be together with a man, the Torah wasn't talking about if they really lamaisa were together with a man. So the roy to be together with a man. That's what Torah means. So then you have to kill them, even if they weren't together with a man. But if they're less than 3 years and 1 day, they're not roy labia. So then if they converted younger than age, you can marry them according to Rabbi Shimon. Tanya nami haki or brayso like this whole isha. Yodas ish bruya libal akasam adaber. It's talking about not that they actually had bia. It's talking about the age that is the roy for bia. Ata omer ruya libal lenevola mamish. You might say it actually means that they had bia. Kshu omer v'chol ataf benashim asher liyadu mishkav zachar. Havi omer ruya libal akasam adaber. right? Because basically the same thing. This price is reiterating the same thing of Rav Huna because it says a second pasuk. So how do we resolve the conflict? Obviously, it's talking about not practically being with men, but the age where they are roy for Rabbiya. So the Gemara says, "Menayati." How do they know how old the girls were? How do you believe them? Say this girl is 3 years old in one day, and this girl is less than that. How do they know? So the Gemara says, "Amar Rav Huna bar Bizna, Amar Rab Shimon Chasida." They pass all these young girls in front of the tzitz. In front of the tzitz was worn on the head of the kohen gadol. Their face became sullen. Their face became paralyzed. If their face looked ugly or it looked worn out, so then we know that they reached the age really boil. You have to kill them. If their face didn't become sullen, it didn't become depressed, it didn't become maybe paralyzed. So we know that she's not royally ball, and they could convert them and then marry them. Amar Rav Nachman, similar Avera Hadrokan. Nachman says, if you want to find out if a person committed an Avera with a woman, an inappropriate relationship with a woman, you see it based on Hadrokan. Hadrokan is some sign in the face of a person, maybe a stroke in the face of a person or paralyzation, which shows that the person committed Avera. Just like we're talking about over here, we find by the story of Pilegish Begiva, right? Pilegish Begiva was a story where there was a concubine, Pilegish, that was dismembered, people of Binyamin, and they got into a civil war in Klal Yisrael, and they didn't want to marry the woman of Binyamin, but eventually they defeated Binyamin, and they wanted the Shevet of Binyamin not to cease. So they found 400 women that were psulos. They wanted to marry them to keep the Shevet of Binyamin alive. So they decided that if they weren't together with men, they can keep them and marry them. How do they know that they were never together with a woman? How you can't just believe them. They took these women and they put them on a barrel of wine, top of wine. If she was together with a man, so then you could smell through her mouth. You'd be able to smell the wine because it would pass through the opening in her vagina, and you could smell it through her mouth. There was no hymen there to block it. But a psula had a hymen over there, so therefore you wouldn't be able to smell the wine. So therefore they know she's a psula. But never know the tzitz. Why do they use this method? Why do they just pass the girls in front of the tzitz of the kohen gadol like they did by Midyan? Amar Rav Kahana B'Reder Rav Nasan LaRatzon Lahem Ksiv. The tzitz is only made to be used for favorable things. The ratzon l'paranos, not the paranos are killing people. It wasn't meant to be used. Yihachi b'Midyan nami. How do they use it to kill women of Midyan? Amar Rav Ashti Lahem Ksiv. Lahem l'ratzon l'paranos. Lavdicham afilu l'paranos. It says for Klal Yisrael it should be for ratzon. These were women of Binyamin. They were Jewish women. Paranos by Avdikachav and even paranos you can use the tzitz. Amar Rav Yaakov or Idi Amar Rav Yosef ben Levi Allah Rav Shimon Yochai Allah follows Shimon Yochai. I don't think we actually pass like this. That if the woman was converted as a baby, a Kohen can marry her. Amar Rav Yaakov or Idi Amar Rav Yeshua. Again, the reason is because we're choshesh that as an Oved Kochavim she was mezana, even when she's less than 3 years old, according to the Rabbanan, and therefore she becomes a zona. She becomes Asher the Kohen. Amar le Rabbi Zeir le Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. Where did you hear that Lachas like Shimon Yochai? You heard it explicitly. You inferred it from something else. So my klala. Where is the inference from? The Amar Rabbi Shimon Levi. Yerachas Haisa Beretz Yisrael. There was one city in Eretz Yisrael Shekar that people were saying bad things about. They're saying that the people involved in the city committed adultery. Vashiga Rabbi Romanus of Bodka. Rebbe sent one of his disciples, Romanus, to check it out. They found that what the inappropriate relations was talking about a convert who was less than 3 years and 1 day, and Rebbe was machshir her to the kahuna. So you see, Rebbe was machshir to the kahuna, even though she was a gioris less than 3 years and 1 day. He was machshir to the kahuna. Amar le beferish shmili. He said back to them, I heard it explicitly. Not from this incident. The Huh? What? Kol עכשיו? Okay, shtei dakot. I'm finishing. All right. So the verse is my clause. So the verse says, "Beferish shmili." Let me call him my. So what was the problem hearing inference? He said Dafka, he heard it explicitly. What was the problem hearing it from inference? Dilma, shiny hustle, maybe over there they okayed it. Whole of an insiv. Once they got married, you're not supposed to marry a Gioris, even if she's Pluta, she was converted less than 3 years old. But because she got married, she already got married. Bulgaris Mukas Ace Lo Yisav, Nasa Nasa, you're not supposed to marry a Kongo, not supposed to marry Mukas Ace or Bulgaris. If he does, he can stay married to her. Haki hashta, where it says haki hashta over there, it makes sense. Bishlam hasam sovalios Bulgaris Taktav, sovalios Bulos Taktav. Right? If a regular Kohen Gadol marries a woman, she's going to become Mukas Ace, and a Bulgaris, she's going to get older, and she's going to be a Ba'ula, she's going to have Bia with him, and the hymen is going to remove. Haka sovalios Zona Taktav. Here you can't say that because the question is she's a zona. Kohen Gadol marries a woman, she's not automatically become a zona. Rav Safra Masna Miklala V'Kashalei. Rav Safra learned this halacha that was like follows Rabbi Shimon from an inference from the story. V'Kashalei Mishani Lehaki. He had a question and he answered it like we said that again like there's a distinction between a Bulgaris and a Mukasetz. The zona tachta, she's not going to be a zona tachta, so therefore you're more reason to be machmir. It's not, you can't learn it from an inference, you have to learn it from the Farish Shemiya, or you could learn it from an inference. You technically could learn it from inference also. Anyway, the halacha I don't think follows Rosh Hashanah. See you and Yud Ben See you and coming up next. Without these people being so rowdy.